The night sky was filled with smoke and fire. The stars that once gave comfort were hidden behind burning clouds. Cities were gone, walls torn apart, and broken weapons lay across the ground. Men and women stood in silence, their eyes empty. They had fought for years, but the enemy always came back stronger. In the ruined capital, the last commanders gathered around a broken table. Maps were burned, and half the markers were gone. Every battle line they had drawn was crushed. Every stronghold had fallen. The air smelled of ash and blood. One old commander looked at the others. His voice shook as he spoke. "We are finished. No more ships. No more reinforcements. There is nothing left to send. Oh, no, 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 no. And then it is over." A younger officer slammed his fist against the table. His hand bled where the wood splintered. "We cannot give up. We must keep fighting, even if it means we fall with the city." But the room was quiet. Everyone knew the truth. The enemy was too strong, and no help would arrive. Across the land, people whispered of the end. Families hid in caves. Children cried in silence, and warriors stood with broken blades, waiting for the final wave. In the shadows of the broken city walls, a girl named Claire walked among the wounded. She was no soldier, but she carried water and bandages. She saw men who could no longer stand, yet still held their weapons close. She saw women who had lost brothers and fathers, but refused to leave the barricades. Their courage made her heart burn, but she also saw despair in every face. One night as the city burned, Claire heard voices in the marketplace. Old men spoke of a people who lived far away on a world no one dared to visit. They said these men and women were harder than iron, born in storms, raised by fire, unbroken by pain. Some called them Deathworlders, but many believed they were only a story told to give false hope. Claire listened in silence. She did not know if the stories were true, but she wanted to believe. She carried the words back to her mother, who lay weak from hunger. Her mother shook her head. "Child, do not chase stories. No one will come. We are alone." Yet the thought stayed in Claire's mind. What if the stories were real? What if someone still heard the cries of the dying? At the same time, in a secret chamber of the palace, the queen stood with her council. She wore no crown, only armor scarred by years of war. Her eyes were sharp, her voice strong, but even she knew how close they were to ruin. "Hope is gone," said one of her ministers. "We cannot hold another week. It is better to surrender." The queen struck the table with her hand. "We do not surrender. We'll never kneel. If we must fall, then we fall as warriors." But later, when she was alone, she looked out from the tower. Flames burned across the horizon, and she could hear distant thunder from the advancing enemy. She whispered to herself, "If there is anyone out there, hear us. If the stories are true, come to us. If not, then let our death be remembered." Her voice was carried on hidden channels across the stars. A signal of despair, a cry for help that no one expected to be answered. Days passed. The enemy marched closer. Soldiers sharpened dull blades. Children hid in cellars. The queen rode among the people, telling them to stand strong. But inside, every heart knew this was the end. Then, on a cold night, Claire stood on the wall with her brother John. They looked to the sky, waiting for the first fires of the enemy attack. Instead, they saw a different light. At first, it was faint, like a star breaking through smoke. Then it grew brighter, until the whole sky burned with fire, not from the enemy, but from something new. The ground shook. Thunder rolled above. Shapes moved in the clouds, dark and massive. John gripped his sister's arm. "Do you see that?" Claire's heart raced. "Yes. Someone has come." The soldiers on the walls shouted in shock. The queen ran to the tower and stared at the sky. For the first time in years, her lips curved into a smile. Hope had returned. The city walls trembled under the sound from the sky. Soldiers froze where they stood, their hands gripping broken spears and rusted rifles. For years they had only seen the fire of the enemy in the heavens. Now, for the first time, the fire was different. It was not falling down to burn them. It was moving with power and purpose, as if guided by unseen hands. The queen stood at the highest tower, her armor catching the glow of the strange light. Her heart pounded in her chest. She had sent her plea into the stars with no hope of an answer, and now something had come. She clenched her fists, unsure if it was salvation or another threat, but she refused to turn away. On the walls below, John could not take his eyes from the sky. His sister Claire stood close beside him. The fire in the clouds grew brighter, and the shadows of massive ships appeared. They did not move like the enemy. They moved with order and discipline, their lines sharp and their descent steady. John whispered, "It cannot be the enemy. They never come like this. This is different." Claire's voice shook. "Do you think it is them? The ones from the stories?" Before John could answer, the ships tore through the smoke and hovered above the burning plains outside the city. Their steel hulls shone against the night sky, and their engines roared like storms. Then beams of light struck the ground, not to destroy, but to scatter the enemy forces waiting for the final strike. The soldiers on the walls cried out. Some dropped to their knees, believing a miracle had come. Others raised their weapons and shouted with renewed courage. For the first time in years, their hearts filled with fire instead of fear. The queen ordered the bells to be rung. The sound echoed across the ruined streets, calling the people to look upon the sky. Men, women, and children stepped out from hiding. They lifted their heads and saw the great ships above them. They saw enemy lines breaking under the sudden storm of fire that rained down from the newcomers. Inside the palace, the council rushed to the queen's side. One minister spoke with disbelief. "Who are they? Where did they come from? How could anyone still answer us after all this time?" The queen's eyes did not leave the window. "They heard us. They are human like us. I know it in my heart." Down on the ground beyond the walls, steel doors opened from the ships. Columns of soldiers marched out. Their armor was dark and unbroken, their steps firm and steady. Each one carried weapons the defenders had never seen before. The enemy turned their fury against them, sending waves of fire and steel, but the newcomers did not falter. They advanced like a storm, cutting through ranks that had crushed kingdoms before. John watched them from the wall with wide eyes. "Look at them, Claire. They are not afraid. Nothing stops them." Claire felt tears burn in her eyes. The stories were true. They are real. Deathworlders have come. As dawn broke, the newcomers secured the plain. Smoke and fire still rose into the sky, but the enemy forces had been pushed back farther than anyone thought possible. For the first time in years, the city gates did not fall. Instead, they held. The queen rode down to the gates with her guard. She stood tall in her armor, her eyes fixed on the approaching soldiers. Dust and blood covered their armor, but they marched with strength and discipline. When the leader of the newcomers stepped forward, the queen met his gaze. He removed his helmet. His face was marked with scars, his eyes hard as steel, but his voice carried calm strength. "We heard your call. We come from Earth. We will fight beside you." The queen drew a sharp breath. The word Earth spread like fire among her people. Old men who had lived through countless battles began to weep. Young soldiers gripped their weapons tighter. Hope had a name now. The leader raised his weapon to the sky. "We did not come for conquest. We came because no human will be left to die alone. Stand with us, and we will drive the enemy from these lands." The queen lifted her sword high. Her voice rang across the walls and streets. "Then we will stand together. From this day, no enemy will break us." A cheer rose, loud and fierce. It shook the ruins and reached the heavens. The people who had given up now believed again. The Deathworlders of Earth had appeared, and with them came the promise of survival. The city that had stood on the edge of death now shook with a new strength. For years, its walls had been symbols of defeat, but now the people filled the streets with cries of courage. They had seen with their own eyes that the warriors from Earth were real. They had watched them descend from the sky, their armor unbroken, their weapons tearing through lines that had crushed nations. John stood beside his sister Claire on the wall. His hands shook as he held his spear, not from fear, but from the fire that now burned in him. He had seen soldiers before, but never like this. These men and women from Earth moved as if battle was part of them. Their steps were steady, their voices strong, and their eyes cold as steel. Claire watched them with the same awe. "Do you see how they fight, John? They do not break, and they do not even slow." John nodded, his jaw tight. "If they stand with us, we may yet live. With them, we can fight back. At dawn, the queen called her commanders to the palace. The leader from Earth, a scarred man named Alex, stood before them. His armor was marked with smoke and blood, but he carried himself with calm power. The queen looked at him with steady eyes. "You came when no one else did. Tell me what drives you to fight for a city you have never seen." Alex's voice was firm. "We come because you are human. Come because Earth remembers its duty. No human will be left to die while we live." The queen lowered her head once, a sign of respect. "Then we stand together. The enemy will strike again soon, and will not let this stand. Can your people hold the walls?" Alex glanced at his warriors who stood in silence behind him. "We will not only hold the walls, we will drive them back." The plan was made. Earth soldiers would join the defenders on the gates and towers. Heavy weapons from their ships would be mounted along the walls. Machines of war, carried down from the sky, would be placed in the streets to block the enemy if the gates fell. When the sun reached its height, the sound of drums shook the plains. The enemy was coming again. Thousands marched, their banners black, their weapons raised. The city that had been broken so many times now stood ready. This time, it was different. This time, the Deathworlders of Earth stood with them. John gripped his spear and looked at Claire. She held a bow in her hands, her face pale but her eyes bright. "We fight together," she said. "We fight together," John answered. The gates shook as the enemy slammed against them. The walls trembled under the strike of their engines. But when the gates burst open, fire answered them. Earth's warriors unleashed storms of steel and flame. Enemy ranks shattered under the first strike. John leapt down from the wall, fighting beside the newcomers. His spear broke against an enemy shield, but before he could fall, Alex's blade cut through the foe. Alex pulled John back to his feet. "Stand firm. Fight hard. Do not yield." Claire loosed arrow after arrow from the wall. Her arms ached, but she did not stop. She saw the enemy pour into the streets, only to be crushed by Earth's machines of war. Their guns roared, their blades cut deep, and the enemy's advance slowed to a crawl. The queen herself rode into the battle on horseback, her sword flashing in the sunlight. Her guards fought around her, but she struck down enemies with her own hands. She shouted to her people, "Hold fast. With Earth beside us, we will not fall." The battle raged until the ground was slick with blood and the air filled with smoke. Again and again the enemy charged, but each time they were broken by the wall of steel and fire. At last, as the sun set, the enemy sounded their retreat. Their banners fell back into the night, leaving their dead across the plain. The city still stood. On the wall, Claire lowered her bow. Tears streaked her face, not from sorrow but from relief. John leaned against the stone, exhausted but alive. The queen rode through the streets, her voice carrying strength. "This day we stood. This day we fought as one. And this day proves the enemy can bleed." The people cheered until their voices filled the ruined sky. The Deathworlders of Earth had not only answered the call, they had brought victory. But in the heart of every warrior, one thought remained. This was only the beginning. The greatest battles were yet to come. The enemy retreat had given the city a night of peace, but it was a fragile peace. Fire still burned in the streets, the wounded filled every hall, and the smell of blood clung to the air. Yet the people lifted their heads higher than before. For the first time in years, they had seen the enemy flee. John and Claire walked together through the ruined marketplace. Broken stones and shattered stalls lay all around them. Claire carried her bow across her shoulder, while John dragged a spear he had taken from the battlefield. Their bodies ached, but their spirits burned with a strength they had never felt. Claire whispered to her brother, "Do you think we can win now?" John looked up at the sky, where the ships of Earth still hovered like silent guardians. "If they stay with us, yes, we can win." At the palace, the queen met again with Alex, the leader of the Earth warriors. They stood over maps laid across the table, lines drawn to mark enemy camps. The queen placed her finger on the largest fortress shown. That is where their strength lies. If we are to break them, we must strike here. But we do not have the numbers. Alex's eyes narrowed. His voice was calm but heavy with purpose. "We have more than numbers. We have the will to fight. My people are ready to take the war to them. If we strike first, we can cut the heart from their army." The queen studied his scarred face, then gave a sharp nod. Then we ride together. At dawn, the soldiers gathered at the gates. The people of the city lined the streets, watching in silence. They saw their queen in armor, mounted on her horse, her sword at her side. Beside her stood Alex and his warriors from Earth, each one armed and ready. Behind them, the city's own soldiers raised their weapons, their fear replaced with determination. Claire joined the archers, and John stood with the spearmen. Neither had ever marched beyond the walls before, but today they stepped forward with the others. When the gates opened, the army poured onto the plains. Dust rose behind their march, banners snapped in the wind, and the sound of drums shook the ground. Above them, ships from Earth moved in the sky, their engines roaring. By midday, they reached the edge of the enemy's camp. It stretched across the hills like a sea of iron. Towers rose high. Guards stood thick along the walls, and smoke poured from their fires. The defenders laughed when they saw the city's broken army approach, but their laughter ended when they saw the Deathworlders of Earth marching at the front. Alex raised his hand. His voice rang out. "Forward! Break their walls. Let them know what it means to stand against us." The first strike came from above. Fire rained from the ships, tearing holes into the enemy lines. Then the ground shook as Earth warriors charged, their blades and guns flashing in the sunlight. The city's soldiers followed, shouting with every step. John's heart pounded as he ran. The clash came like a storm. Spears shattered, arrows flew, swords clashed against shields. He fought with all his strength, standing shoulder to shoulder with men he had only met that morning. He saw Claire's arrows cut down attackers from the walls of the fortress. The queen herself rode into the thick of the battle. Her sword struck down one enemy after another, her horse driving forward without fear. Around her, her guards fought with fury, protecting her as she cut a path toward the gates. Alex and his warriors reached the walls first. With charges and steel hooks, they climbed under a rain of arrows and fire. They reached the top, pulled defenders down, and cleared the way. John and the others pushed forward, following them into the fortress. Inside the camp, the fighting turned into chaos. Streets burned, tents collapsed, and cries filled the air. Claire's arrows struck from every high point she could reach, while John fought through narrow alleys with blood on his hands. At last, Alex raised his banner above the fortress gate. His voice roared across the battlefield. "The heart of the enemy is broken. Push them back. Do not stop." The enemy line shattered. Those who could fled into the hills, leaving their dead behind. The fortress fell before the setting sun. When the fighting ended, the queen stood beside Alex at the top of the wall. Her armor was torn, her blade stained, but her eyes burned with fire. She lifted her sword high. "Today we have shown the enemy that we are not broken. With Earth beside us, we will take back what was lost." The soldiers cheered until their voices shook the hills. For the first time in years, victory was not a dream but a truth. Yet in the silence that followed, Alex looked toward the horizon. He knew the enemy would return in greater numbers. This battle was only the beginning of a much larger war. Smoke still rose from the ruined fortress. The fields around it were covered with broken weapons and fallen soldiers. The city's army and the warriors from Earth stood among the wreckage, their armor marked with blood and dust. They had won a great battle, but everyone knew this was not the end. The enemy had lost a fortress, but their true strength was still waiting beyond the hills. The queen walked through the camp with her guards. Her sword hung at her side, and her face was stern. She looked at the wounded who lay on the ground, and she spoke to them with a strong voice. "You have given blood for freedom. Your sacrifice will not be forgotten. This is only the first step. We will not stop until our lands are free." Beside her, Alex stood silent. His eyes never rested. He watched the hills, the broken towers, and the men moving across the battlefield. He had fought in many wars, and he knew what was coming. The enemy would not forgive this strike. It would return with greater numbers and heavier weapons. That night, the leaders gathered in the ruins of the fortress. Torches burned against the dark walls, and maps were spread across broken tables. The queen pointed to the plains east of the city. "They will gather here. If they march again, they will bring more than we can face on these walls. We must prepare the ground for war." Alex placed his hand on the map. "We cannot wait behind stone. We must take the fight to them. Every day we delay gives them time to gather more. If we strike fast, we can break their strength before it grows. The commanders of the city argued. Some wanted to stay inside the walls and fight from safety. Others feared that open battle would lead to destruction. But when Alex spoke again, his words cut through their doubt. We are Deathworlders. On Earth, we fight storms, beasts, and wars greater than this. We do not wait for death to come. We meet it face to face and crush it. The queen looked at him and then nodded. Then we ride at dawn. The next day, the city's soldiers and the warriors from Earth marched together once more. John held his spear tightly as he walked in the ranks. Claire walked with the archers, her bow across her shoulder. The memory of the last battle still burned in them, but so did the fire of victory. When they reached the plains, they saw the enemy waiting. Endless lines stretched across the horizon. Towers of steel rose behind their ranks, and drums pounded like thunder. It was the largest force either John or Claire had ever seen. Fear touched their hearts, but when they looked at the warriors from Earth, standing calm and ready, they found courage again. The queen rode along the front line, her sword raised. Her voice carried over the army. Today we fight not for walls or thrones. We fight for every child, every mother, every brother and sister. We fight so that no one will ever kneel again. Stand with me, stand with Earth. Fight until the last breath. The army roared with her words. Then Alex lifted his weapon high, and the warriors from Earth struck their shields with one sound. The ground shook under their call to war. The battle began with fire from the sky. Ships of Earth unleashed their power, tearing holes into the enemy lines. The ground forces charged. The clash was fierce, louder and deadlier than anything before. John fought in the thick of it, his spear thrusting against armored foes. His arms ached, his chest burned, but he did not fall back.
Alex
Fought near him, moving like a storm through the enemy ranks. Every strike of his blade left another body on the ground. Claire stood with the archers on the ridge. Arrow after arrow flew from her bow, cutting down enemy riders who tried to circle the army. She did not rest, her hands raw, her eyes burning, but her will was firm. The queen rode into the heart of the battle once again. Her guards fell around her, but she pressed forward, her sword cutting through enemy shields. Her armor was dented, her horse bleeding, yet she did not slow. Her courage drove her soldiers to fight harder, to strike deeper, to refuse to yield. Hours passed, and the field was covered with blood. The enemy pressed with wave after wave, but the warriors of Earth and the city's soldiers held firm. Step by step, they drove the enemy back. At last, when the sun set red against the sky, the enemy lines broke. Their banners fell, and their soldiers fled into the darkness. The plains were theirs. The queen raised her sword high. We have shown them the strength of Earth and the will of our people. This war is not finished, but tonight we have one. The roar of victory filled the night, but Alex stood silent, his eyes still on the horizon. He knew the enemy would return again, stronger and fiercer than ever. And when they did, only the strongest would survive. The sun rose over the plains, casting long shadows across the battlefield. The city's soldiers and the warriors from Earth had gathered their forces, preparing for the enemy's final strike. The queen rode along the front line, her armor dented, but her eyes fierce. Did not speak much, but her presence alone stirred courage in every heart. John tightened his grip on his spear. He'd feel the tension in the air. Every soldier knew that today could decide the fate of their world. Claire stood beside him, her bow ready. Her arrows were sharp, her hands steady, but she could not hide the fear in her chest. She knew the enemy would come stronger than ever. Alex, the leader of the Earth Warriors, moved through the ranks. His voice was calm but carried authority. Hold the line, fight together. Today we show what it means to face death and survive. No one falls while we stand. The enemy appeared on the horizon like a storm. Thousands of soldiers, towers of steel, and war machines moved toward them. Dust rose into the sky, hiding the sun, and the ground shook under their march. The soldiers of the city gasped, but Alex stepped forward, standing tall. Do not fear them. We are stronger than they think. When the enemy reached the edge of the plains, the battle began. Fire roared from the ships of Earth, striking the front lines of the enemy. The ground forces charged, meeting the enemy with shields and swords. The clash of steel echoed across the battlefield. John thrust his spear into the first soldier he met, pushing him back. Another enemy swung a blade at his side, but he blocked and countered. Around him, the Earth warriors moved like storms, cutting through lines that had seemed unbreakable the day before. Claire fired arrows from the ridge, watching as enemy riders fell one by one. Her arms burned, but she did not stop. She saw her brother fighting through the chaos, and it gave her strength. They were no longer afraid. They were warriors. The queen led a charge into the heart of the enemy. Her sword flashed in the sunlight as she struck down anyone who came near. Her guards fell beside her, but she pressed forward, her courage unshaken. The soldiers of the city followed, their fear replaced with fire. Alex and his warriors climbed over broken walls and through shattered gates. Their weapons were heavy, their movements precise. Every strike left an enemy down. Every step pushed them closer to victory. Hours passed, and the battle raged. Dust and smoke filled the air. Cries of the wounded echoed across the plains. John's arms ached, his legs were heavy, but he continued to fight. Claire's arrows were gone, yet she picked up fallen weapons and pressed into the fight. The queen's sword was stained with blood, but she fought like a force of nature. At last, the enemy's command tower was reached. Alex led the final charge. His blade cut through the leader of the enemy forces, breaking their control over the army. Confusion spread among the enemy lines. Soldiers stumbled, their formations collapsing under the relentless strike of the city's soldiers and the Earth warriors. John saw the enemy retreat. Their banners fell, their machines overturned, and their soldiers fled into the distance. Claire ran beside him, shouting in triumph. The queen raised her sword high, her voice carrying across the plains. The enemy is broken. We have won this day. Let it be known that we fight together. Together we are stronger than any force that comes against us. The battlefield was quiet except for the heavy breathing of survivors. Bodies lay on the ground, both friend and foe. The city's soldiers helped each other, carrying the wounded to safety. The Earth warriors moved among them, offering aid and protection. Alex looked toward the horizon, knowing the war was not yet over. They will return, he said, his voice low but firm. We have won today, but tomorrow may bring another storm. We must be ready. The queen nodded. Then we will stand. We will fight, and we will not fall. With Earth beside us, no enemy can destroy us. John and Claire walked through the field, exhausted but alive. They had seen the power of the warriors from Earth, and they had fought beside them. Hope burned again in their hearts. The city was still standing, and its people had survived. The queen rode to the top of the hill and looked over the battlefield. The sun was setting, casting red light across the plains. The enemy had been defeated, but the battle had shown them the strength of unity, courage, and human will. The Deathworlders of Earth had not only appeared to save them, they had shown them that humanity could stand against any force, no matter how powerful. And as night fell, every soldier, every citizen, every child in the city knew that they had survived because together they were unstoppable. The battlefield was quiet now. Smoke rose from broken towers and fallen machines, and the ground was scarred with trenches and footprints of war. The enemy had been defeated, their forces scattered, and their command shattered. The queen rode through the plains, her armor battered, her sword still in her hand. Every step reminded her of the cost, but also of the victory they had earned. John and Claire walked beside the queen, their weapons lowered but their bodies still tense. The fight had left them exhausted, their muscles aching, but they felt a pride they had never known. They had survived against overwhelming odds. They had seen the power of humans united. Alex, the leader of the Earth Warriors, moved through the city streets with his soldiers. His eyes scanned every corner, making sure the enemy would not rise again. Though his armor was dented and his face marked with blood, he carried himself with calm authority. The enemy will not return for a long time, he said, but we must remain vigilant. War is never over until the last threat is gone. The queen dismounted and stood beside him. Your people have saved us. Without you, this city would have fallen. We owe you everything. Alex shook his head. We did not fight for thanks. We fought because no human should be left to die alone. Today, we stand together, and together we win. That is all the reward we need. The citizens of the city began to emerge from their hiding places. Families reunited, Children ran to their parents, and survivors embraced one another with tears in their eyes. The streets, once filled with fear, were now alive with hope. John saw a man helping an old woman carry water. Claire noticed children picking up discarded weapons, pretending to be warriors inspired by the courage they had seen. The queen raised her sword high, calling for silence. Her voice rang across the city. People of this land, today we have shown that we are not weak. Today we have shown that even when all hope is lost, we can rise. Today we stand free, and we stand together with those who answered our call. A cheer rose, loud and fierce, echoing across the plains and into the sky. The soldiers from Earth and the city's defenders stood together, their voices united. The queen looked toward Alex and nodded. The galaxy will know that when humanity fights as one, no power can stand against us. John turned to Claire. We did it. We survived. We helped save everyone. Claire smiled, though her face was streaked with dust and blood. We survived because we had them with us. Because we stood together. We are stronger than we ever thought. As night fell, the city glowed with fires of rebuilding. Soldiers patrolled the streets, repairing walls and securing the gates. The queen and Alex stood on the highest hill, overlooking the city and the plains. The horizon was clear, the enemy gone, and the stars shone above them once more. Alex spoke quietly. This victory is not the end. Others may come. But humanity has shown today that it will not be defeated. We will rise, we will fight, and we will endure. The queen placed her hand on his shoulder. Then we will rebuild, and we will be ready. No enemy will ever take this city again. No force will break our spirit. John and Claire joined them on the hill, looking at the city that had survived against all odds. They saw smoke rising from repaired buildings, fires lit to cook food, and people laughing for the first time in years. They felt hope in a way they had never felt before. The queen lifted her sword one last time, pointing it toward the stars. To the people of Earth, to the warriors who answered our call, we thank you. You have given us life, strength, and courage. And as long as we stand, the light of humanity will never fade. Alex nodded, his face calm and strong. We will not forget this day. We will return home knowing we have saved lives, and that our people will always answer when needed. Humanity is strong. We are strong. The wind carried the sounds of laughter, cries of joy, and the quiet of those who mourned their fallen. Even in sorrow, the people felt power in their hearts. They had fought, survived, and won. And as dawn broke over the city, gold and red lights spilling across the plains, everyone knew the truth. When all hope was lost, the Deathworlders of Earth appeared. They had come to fight, to save, and to show that no force could ever crush the courage of humanity. The Queen, John, Claire, Alex, and all who had fought stood together, looking to the horizon. Their eyes held fire, their hearts held courage, and their spirits held hope. The galaxy had tried to break them, but humanity had risen. And from that day, the story of their victory spread across the stars. A tale of courage, unity, and the unbroken spirit of the Deathworlders of Earth.